You want a taste of just how delusional and how crazy the Brexiteers and especially the free market fundamentalists were on deregulating the UK. They had a grand plan to come up with a UK only safety mark, that this was going to be the new world leader in safety mark, that if this was from the UK, you knew that this was a safe product to use. But what were they going to do? They were going to massively deregulate the UK, or at least that was their grand plan of what they wanted to do. And luckily, they haven't been able to follow through on that yet. But if they had generally done this, this UK-owned safety mark would have cost manufacturers here in the UK thousands on different label printing. uh, the EU wouldn't have recognised it, which would have meant that products with the UK safety stamp would not have been allowed to be sold in the EU, and no other country at that point was generally willing to accept a UK only safety mark. Because one of the big things we always pointed out was that the EU was a big regulatory superpower. And GDPR is a perfect example of this. Because the GDPR rules and laws, no one hadn't really been done before. But when the EU came in and said, we are going to introduce these laws, then everyone around the world suddenly had to take up and even pay attention and listen. Because if you wanted to do anything in the EU in that territory, then you had to follow GDPR. They were a regulatory superpower. But the Brexiteers, for some reason, thought that part of their free market fundamentalist ideology and part of their whole drive to get 0% tariffs and we will become this free trading nation was that they would do the same thing with safety marks. This would be a UK safety marks with little to no really safety regulation actually behind it. It would have been a completely useless stamp, but it just goes to show you the pure delusion that these Brexiteers really had. And we've just got the news today that the UK has now abandoned getting rid of the EU safety mark, and also it also seems to thrown to its curve its own UK safety mark as well. And let's remind you, this is a significant Brexit climb down, a massive climb down. But it is, as we always said, reality always comes knocking on the door of Brexit, and sooner or later, like it or not, the Brexiteers have to bow to reality. And this is one case where they have had to. So expect probably a lot of fire and fury from the Brexiteers in probably the next couple of days when they realize this. Certainly the next Brexit committee is going to be interesting. It's probably going to be filled with Brexiteers complaining about this. But yeah, we are in for, I think, some more fun and games from the Brexiteers talking about this, saying that that Rishi Sunak is betraying Brexit again. But anyway, let's get into this and find out more about this, because this is, as we said, it's just once again, that's just the reality of the situation of Brexit. Brexit was not going to be this big, massive thing of we hold all the cards, we can make all these rules, and everyone else is going to be follow them. We're going to be the international regulatory superpower, not the EU. There you go. Anyway, let's go diving into this. But before we do that, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and one off today's link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, there's the YouTube thank you button and the Patreon page and the Pony Club down below as well. So, as always, thank you very much for all those people who do help and support the channel that way. Even if you do, just click the like and share button. That always helps very much. So, as always, thank you very much to everyone who does support the channel. So, let's crack on into this. So this comes from The Guardian with the title of "The UK to retain the EU safety mark in latest Brexit climb down." The UK will retain the EU's product safety mark indefinitely in the latest climb down from the proposed post-Brexit changes, after the government has bowed to pressure from the industry and manufacturers. And that was what was saying, whenever we had covered this in the past, it was from industry and manufacturers saying, what are you doing? Why are you going to get rid of this? What's your reasoning? There's no logical, sound business reason to do this. And yet, one of the things that the Brexiteers always love to put forward was the idea that we are going to do Brexit because it makes perfect business sense. And, believe us, because most of us people who are backing Brexit are millionaires and billionaires. So we know what we're doing, right? Anyway, the CE, that's the Conformité European, that's how you say it, mark, is used by the bloc to clarify that a wide range of items from electrical goods, construction materials to medical devices and toys meet safety standards. And the safety mark has been expected to be replaced by the new UKCA, UK Conformity Assessed mark, for goods sold in Great Britain from the end of 2024 after several extensions to the deadline for the changeover. Businesses had called on the government to actually extend the use of the CE mark, saying that forcing them to meet the new UK rules would initially duplicate EU product standards and would add significant costs at a time when many had been trying to get over the disruption caused by the pandemic and stubbornly high inflation. The UK mark would not have also been recognised in the EU, so it would have only been required for UK goods sold in the Great Britain. Stephen Perlson, the chief executive of Make UK, the trade body representing manufacturers, said he had been lobbying the government to retain the CE mark. He called the indefinite delay a pragmatic and common sense decision that manufacturers will very much welcome and support. Phillipson said, the announcement will help safeguard the competitiveness of manufacturers and aid the UK as a destination for investment. It should bring more confidence about doing business in the UK and recognises the need of the work with the reality of doing business. Smaller businesses have been particularly concerned about the cost of adapting to the new UK conformity agreements. So this is yet another thing of this has really killed Brexit. In all honesty, us keeping this has well and truly killed Brexit, because now you're saying we have to follow EU rules and laws and regulations, because if you're keeping that EU mark, well, now you have to follow, businesses now will have to follow EU laws and regulations. So when Brexiteers complain about you know people like me or you know Keir Starmer, etc., anyone in Labour or the Lib Dems saying that we need to do alignment deals with the EU, we sort of already have in a way by choosing to opt and keep this mark. But again, it's just a complete and utter destruction of Brexit. Brexit was pointless. It was never going to be any benefits. And I'm shocked that there has been, well, at the moment, I'm shocked that there has been so little outcry about this. But that will probably change. But we'll see. Tina McKenzie, the policy chair for the Federation of Small Businesses, said that the continuation of the CE mark make products would allow the time for small firms to adjust to the UKCA marking system and focus on growing their businesses both at home and overseas. The Department for Business and Trade had said that they had made the decision after discussions with the industry and described it as a, quote, key ask from businesses and would ease the burdens to boost growth for the UK economy. So looks like Kimmy Badnock oh boy, there is probably, you said this before, there's highly likely going to be at some point a cabinet reshuffle. And it would not surprise me, if Brexiteers were lobbying over the summer to get rid of her, to remove her. She's already massively upset them by not having the big bonfire of EU regulations. Of course, you may remember her own infamous quote, I'm not going to be an arsonist, which, hey, as someone who is a Brexiteer, you sort of were voting to be a big arsonist, because that's what the Brexiteers wanted, even back in 2016. Her position, as we always said, Brexiteers had very contradictory positions from each other, and it has now started to show. Now that we've, quote, got Brexit, they now can't actually decide what Brexit should actually be amongst themselves. And so they are breaking up, arguing amongst themselves, and this is only a good thing, to be honest. Because now we should need to start pulling across these soft Brexiteers. You may remember we once covered an article about how prohibition ended up being cancelled, and it was because these soft prohibitionists saw the consequences of what prohibition was and how bad it was for America, and the consequences it was having on the country, and then they ended up becoming anti prohibitionists. And I think this is going to be the same thing that you're probably seeing, that the soft Brexiteers are transitioning away and they're losing a lot of support. And I think there are a lot of soft Brexiteers, and they are seeing the consequences, and they aren't liking what they're seeing. But back to it. So, ministers said that the move would give businesses certainty and would prevent a cliff edge in December of next year, when the UK mark was set to be due to be introduced. Companies will also be able to choose whether to use either the UK mark or the CE mark when selling their products in Britain. So bear in mind, if you're a UK company, which mark are you going to use? You're going to use the CE mark. Like the idea that companies are going to just change over to the UK mark, it's kind of pointless, because if you want to sell your goods in the Europe as well, why even bother with the UK mark? Why even bother putting it on your products, even if you want to sell it in just Great Britain? Because if you want to sell it to the EU, you've got to have that CE mark. If you don't have that mark, you can't sell into Europe, because guess what? Europe doesn't recognize it. So this is, to be honest, it just goes to show you what a colossal waste of time trying to work on this mark was. The fact that no companies will end up using this mark, and to be honest, it will be a massive embarrassment to the Brexiteer cause, because everyone's using the European mark. Why? Because Europe is a regulatory superpower, and they would rather have what the CE mark represents and the power that actually puts on their product, compared to the UK one, which is just completely meaningless. So, they had previously argued that the UK mark would allow the UK to control its goods regulations while maintaining high safety standards. The business minister, Kevin Holdrickham, said that by extending the CE mark usage from across the UK, firms can now focus their time and money on creating jobs and growing the economy. So you can even see this. They're not bothered by that mark. The fact that it is now an indefinite extension alone says everything you need to say. Businesses have gone, thank God we don't have to bother with that useless UK mark. We're just going to focus on using the CE one. That means all these businesses are now going to continue to follow UK, EU rules, laws, and regulations. And should the UK government try and lower standards or anything like that, businesses are going to kick off. So the retention of the CE mark is the latest in a long line of announcements and postponements regarding post-Brexit rules. Members of the food industry are also awaiting information from the government about the introduction of post-Brexit import controls. Remember, I've said before, I think this is going to get extended again. And I think the UK government doing this from Kiwi Badnock, I think it's going to lead to another extension. This is going to get kicked down the road again. And it just goes to show you that we really did rely on Europe and how much we needed Europe. And like it or not, that is just the case. We are a European country. Us being outside the EU does not make any bit of good sense to the well-being and the interests of the UK. And Brexiteers can't understand that, because they are obsessed with this post-imperial nostalgia, and they can't seem to get rid of it. You know, the whole pivot to the Pacific and as joining the Pacific Partnership is all part of that, but it doesn't give us any benefits. And of course, it's all part, of course, of this free market fundamentalist, this crazy ideology that we need low taxes, low regulations, and everything will be fantastic. There's no country in the world that does that because it doesn't have good outcomes. So the final version of the UK's new border strategy, known as the Target Operating Model, or TOM, is expected to be released shortly, after the government's consultation with the industry closed its plans in late May. As I said, we'll see what happens with that. I think it's going to be extended again. I really don't think it will. I really don't think it will go in. I really do. The introduction of these checks on goods arriving from overseas has been delayed several times over the past few years, and the government has changed its plans ever since they were first envisaged. Because there is no good way, especially when it comes to sort of food, when a vast quantity of our food comes from Europe, and especially now in through Northern Ireland. Are you going to start making these changes? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Especially at the time when you've got really high food inflation. Because every single time, as it said, every single time they've since the beginning they've wanted to bring in these changes, everyone's gone, no, that's an awful. That's going to have bad consequences. It's going to have ripple effects that are going to be very bad for the industry. And of course, the Brexit government doesn't want to be seen that, because obviously, as we've always said, with Brexit, they want to have some form of good wins, and this climb down is not a good win for them, because the fact that it is indefinite, and the UK government has said, well, you can either use the UK one, which they hope people are going to use, or the European one, and I guarantee you, at some point in the future, we will read an article that basically says no one is using it. That no one is using the UK mark because it's just worthless. And as we said, well, if we did this, if we did all Brexit so that we could have our own standards and stuff like that, why then are all these businesses not using the UK mark? Why are they using the European? And remember, Brexiteers always used to claim that businesses were on their side, but when you went to these businesses, they never were. There was maybe one or two, and of course there was the guy in the chemical industry, and even he, even the other bosses of the UK chemical industries look at him with bizarre gone out stares, what are you saying? That's going to damage our industry, you fool. Why are you saying this? Yeah, it's I guarantee you we will have a story in a couple of years where it's just yeah, no one's using the UK mark. No one's using it. Everyone's using the European one because it's better, it's worth more, has more recognition, has more power. And then you've got to ask this question: if all the businesses are doing that, we're using, aligning with EU standards, rules, and regulations, what was the point of Brexit? We're getting there. We are getting there very, very quickly. Very, very quickly indeed. And I really do think, especially in the next parliament, we are going to have, I think, open discussions about the cost of Brexit, and more importantly, someone will ask, "What was the point of it? What was the point?" Because there was no point to doing it. It was this bizarre populist movement that was, driven by, the 2015 migrant crisis, very much so. It's proved to be a complete waste of time and a complete waste of energy. And yeah, we should reverse it. But we'll get there eventually. We're well on our way. We're well on our way to doing so. And like I say, things like this just prove the case even more, just how bad Brexit was. And you are going to see no UK marks in the future. Or at least if they do, the usage of them is going to be so low, it does not even justify having the mark. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.